Serious people of Reddit, what is scariest thing that happened to you that was not paranormal? When I was 12 I often snuck out at night from our mobile home that I shared with my 5 siblings, mom, and abusive stepdad. I would walk half a mile to a nearby elementary school and swing on the swing set for an hour or so, and then sneak back home. One night on my way to the school a stranger grabbed me from behind, dragged me off the road into the wooded area, and wrapped me. Most of the fear was me afraid I was going to die. The pain was unimaginable. He would smash his fist into the side of my head every time I screamed, and I was starting to black out, and I remember crying, so scared that I would never see my baby siblings again. Then I woke up at the break of dawn, alone in the underbrush, got dressed after finding my clothes, snuck back into our home, took a shower, and got dressed in some baggy clothes, and went into my siblings' room to watch them sleep for a little bit. I didn't end up telling anyone about this until after I had broken down about it in therapy a couple years ago. Took me until last summer to finally tell my mom, who now has trouble speaking and looking at me because of the intense guilt she feels, both at letting me be abused by her then husband and the rap. I still have nightmares that I'm being beaten to death, surrounded by pain. I was rapped again at 24 but it just didn't come close to the first one, if that makes sense. It wasn't nearly as terrifying, though obviously still awful. Almost 30 now, hoping nothing like that ever happens again. I was the victim of an attempted kidnapping when I was 11. What made it worse was that I was standing across the street from my house. I went to dinner at my friend's house a few houses down and across the street. After dinner I walked back home as I had done many times before. I was right across the street looking at my house waiting to cross because a car was coming. It was a white van that came to a stop right in front of me. A guy rolled the driver's window down and told me to come here. I shook my head no. Someone opened the rear sliding door and began getting out. Remember all those videos you watch as a kid telling you what to do in these situations? I forgot all of it in that moment and froze. I was paralyzed with fear for a moment until my flight response finally kicked in. I yelled no at the top of my lungs and started running back to my friend's house. Thankfully her dad was out working in the front yard. The van did a U-turn and the tires screeched as they peeled out of there. My friend's dad called the cops and walked me back home where the cops came to get a report. The very next day there was a news report that a young girl was kidnapped from a nearby community by a vehicle matching the description of the one that tried to take me. They were eventually stopped trying to get into Mexico with the kid. This happened in southern Arizona. TW, suicide attempt, but he's perfectly okay. It's been 2 years. He's happy and healthy. I've mentioned it on here before, but never really went in depth. Finding and reading my son's suicide note while putting away laundry. At the time he was 10. He addressed half to me, half to my ex-wife. To me, he wrote that he was going to remove himself from the world, so I wouldn't have a target on my back anymore. Without him, his mother wouldn't be able to hold power over me anymore. He thanked me for showing him how strong a dad can be and how much I showed him I loved him. He called me his tank, video game term, but said it was his turn now. To my ex-wife, he basically used every curse word in the book. He told her how she ruined our family, how he was glad he was going, so he would never have to see her again. He told her he hoped she enjoyed her vodka and men. And he told her that if she dared contact me again he would come back from hell just to torture her. When I found it, I couldn't help it. I broke down right there in his room. He found me, saw I had the note in my hand, and just broke down. He showed me the rope he made out of his sheets. That he was going to do it that night, after I was in bed. His room had a window that went out to the balcony, and he had removed the screen so he could quietly sneak out. He was within hours of killing himself, and if I hadn't put his clothes away I wouldn't have seen that note again. He's happy and healthy now, after lots of therapy. We've never been happier as a 2-person family. Both our lives are better now, but every now and then, at night, I have to quietly open his door to make sure he's still there. This one is a 2-for-1. Out camping in Black Forest in Germany with a friend 16 or something at the time. We decided to set up our tents, not too far from a castle somewhere on a hilltop. Mind you, that area is pretty busy and not at all remote. But if you want to go camping/hiking in Europe, your options are limited. That day was rainy, so we did not see that many people along the trails. After we put up our tents, we went to check the castle. After about 10 minutes, a lot of people all dressed up in medieval outfits started showing up and looked at us funny. Either because we did not belong, or the smell of weed made him angry, I don't know. The entire evening we could see this orange hue come from the ruins, prob from the campfires. But suddenly they start banging drums and howling like wolves. A bit later we hear people run through the forest left and right, but could not see them. Definition thought it was some weird cult. Later the same night, when things seem to have settled, we hear footsteps. As they get closer they get faster and faster. I turn off our light, cause him scared and hoping they would not see us. Suddenly something rushes past the tent and starts screaming like a pig. Turned out to be a hog that charged our tent, but missed or something, and ended up in our campfire embers. Sleepless night, that one. There's a popular fishing spot by me in a local river that sometimes can have pretty fast water. The weekend before, an elderly man was wearing his waders, fell in the water, sunk because of his full waders, and was washed down river, unable to get up. Because of the fast water, my boyfriend and I decided the next weekend we would fish down river from that spot. We knew the water was high and were going to be extra careful in light of the recent event. Well, I had just lost 25 pounds and hadn't been in fast water since then. My boyfriend got out in the river and held his hand out to me to help me cross. I get to him and I find that the rocks are just flowing out from under my wading boots. I knew what was happening and I was terrified because I was in waders and there was a large and very deep pool just downstream from me. I was leaning against him and told him I can't get my feet under me. From there it escalated to him bear hugging me and trying to push me to the bottom so I could walk out. He's nearly the same size as me, so I figured we were both going to be swept away. I kept fighting him because I thought it was him picking me up, not the water. Eventually he was able to throw me to the edge of the riverbank, where I went under. I was then able to kneel up and be stable while my waders were completely flooded. We got out of the water and decided to never fish at that spot again. Getting caught up in customs/immigration for no reason is really scary. At this point they are just intending to traumatize people. It's not even good for investigative purposes. If someone really was a terrorist or something. The worst I've ever been treated in my life by a government official wasn't in Scotland, though after Lockerbie they got tough as fuck, or in the US, when I was flagged for taking loads of last-minute flights and having a name similar to someone on a wordclist, but in Canada of all places. I was driving to the Winnipeg area to visit a guy I was seeing. I figure easy peasy. I've passed into Canada several times on the east coast, so NBD. Nope. Some lunatic Quebecois agent got all hyped up for what seemed to be no reason. They questioned me for ages. They opened up every crook, cranny, and crevice in my car, took out and examined every piece of clothing. They first just read through my texts as they came in, including such incriminating messages as, "Do you think you'll be here in time for dinner?" and "I think I'm going to make spaghetti." Until they then asked to read the entire history of the text exchange with my boyfriend. Please, keep in mind I was a far woman in my 30s, not some prime candidate for human trafficking. I had a good job, proof of money in the bank, proof I'd be returning to the States, etc. They seemed super determined to catch me in a lie, asking repeatedly about DUIs. I've never even gotten a ticket while driving. Jail time, over and over. There were a few other people who waited in the same area, and it turned out they did have DUIs in the US and they were turned away firmly but politely. Nothing like that for me. They literally yelled at me when they asked me to repark my car, but just pointed in a general area. Turned out they wanted a specific space, even though literally no one indicated which one, and even as they were yelling they did not tell me what to do, only that I was doing it wrong. As the hours dragged on, I started to feel pretty scared. They eventually said I couldn't leave, which was weird as I didn't ask to. I was super hungry and eventually got pretty shaky after a dinner time came and went. I asked for water and no one would let me get my water bottle or let me leave. I was bored, Didn't have my phone and they wouldn't let me get a book from my car. They'd only give me the conditional entry thing I had to staple into my passport and stamp when I was leaving. They were absolutely complete dicks to me for no reason. As I left, they made some shitty comment about me being fat and referencing a conversation with my sister, so they'd read through all my text chains in French, assuming I do not speak it. I was so fucking pissed my anger could have fueled the walk to Winnipeg. Edit. I found out later they opened, but did not close my MacUpen toiletries, and it was all open/broken at the bottom of my bag. I had to rebuy everything, shampoo, etc. That had to have been intentional. I drove through around lunchtime, 12 or 1, and didn't get out until after 8 p.m. I don't think I'll ever go to Canada again. I was on vacation with my parents on some northern German island. I think it was Norderney. I must have been about 10 years old. We were at the beach. It was one of those rare days when the sun was just right, so that the cold beach water was actually pleasant, but not so hot that you'd want to stay inside to begin with. I had spent some time swimming and playing with the waves. My parents went to a cafe within sight of the beach and let me play. The water was low enough that I could stand in it, so they didn't worry. I ended up being rather disappointed with the waves I was getting and swam a bit further out to get bigger waves to play with. After a few very satisfying waves sloshing me about, I went to stand up and found I couldn't. I'd gotten far enough out that my feet weren't reaching sand anymore. Apparently the waves dragged me out a bit. The beach was framed on both sides with big wooden poles connected by big red ropes, and I had gotten just past the last pole. I heard a whistling noise, then another, but I didn't know what that meant, and didn't care either. I was in danger. I tried to swim to the shore, but the waves were pulling me back, so I swam sideways to the nearest pole. I came up a few meters short, but pushed through, and managed to get close enough to grab the rope. I pulled myself to the shore and barely escaped with my life. Some old dude with a whistle approached me and asked me if I was alright. I just glared at him and went back to my parents, who by now had gotten quite panicked because they lost sight of me. I was done swimming for the day. I later realized I had quite a few deep scratches on my stomach from when I held onto the rope and was moved around by the waves. My dad sent me up to a friend's attic to clean it out. I get up there, and he says just take out everything and throw it out the hole I went through. I did just that. I even threw out the long wooden slabs I found everywhere. Turns out those wooden slabs were supposed to be holding my weight. Keep in mind that I had no idea what they were for, so just threw all of them out. I sat down in an area where the ceiling came down real low. I lean back to grab something, and I hear a sound like someone ripping paper all around me. Poof. The ceiling broke underneath me, and instinctively I grab onto the rafters. I was hanging like a cat from the rafters with my back to the ground for about 5 minutes, which doesn't sound like much, but while I was hanging on there I felt something on my face. At first I thought it was a piece of the ceiling, but it moved again. I swiped my face with my right hand, meaning I was only hanging on with my left hand. I looked at my hand, and it was covered in blood. Like a lot of blood. I was so confused because I didn't fall, I just caught myself. I tell out to my dad, who was trying to fix something underneath me so I can come down. He hands me a paper towel and says put pressure on where it was bleeding. I put pressure on my cheek thinking I cut the side of my face. I felt something go down the left side of my face. I thought maybe this time it was actually a spider. I switched which hand I was hanging on with and swiped the left side of my face. More blood. Now I'm panicking on the inside. I was thinking, oh no, what happened? Did I somehow crack my head? If so, is there dust falling into my open skull? After what felt like an eternity, my dad gives me the okay to lower myself down. I was gasping for air because the air in the attic was hot and metallic from my blood. My dad and my friend's parents were horrified when they saw my face, shoulders and back had blood dripping down it. My dad runs over and says I must have somehow opened my head. He takes the hose and cleans the blood off of my head, and he sees a bunch of little holes scattered across my scalp. He takes off my shirts and washes off the blood from my shoulders, neck and chest. I asked if my head was open, and he said no. I was confused and scared, cause I didn't know where the blood was coming from. My friend's mom gave me a bottle of medical alcohol and said go tilt the bathroom and wash my head with it. I put the alcohol on my head and scrubbed. It burned so bad. I kept bleeding a little after, but it stopped eventually. It turned out that the holes and blood was from rusty nails and screws sticking out from the ceiling. I must have bumped my head when I went to cath the rafters. I think the scariest thing about it was just the amount of blood. Plus the scare of almost falling from the attic. 10/10ths would not recommend. And if you're going to clean out an attic, make sure you have proper support. I, maybe 12 years old at the time, was on a summer vacation with my dad, his wife and family on a little town with quite a long beach. This beach was divided in 3 sections. Middle one was red flagged. I found out later why. One day after having lunch, I decided to go alone to the beach with my bodyboard, since everybody was eating ice cream at our place. I was pretty shy back then. I didn't like to be in a beach full of people, so I went bodyboarding to the middle part of the beach cause nobody was there. After a couple of minutes in the water, I didn't realize, but I was so damn far away from the shore. I was trying my best to swim back at it, but I was just being dragged further back. The goddamn middle part was a rip current. I started panicking. No family was there to see me, not even a Baywatch. I honestly thought I was going to the infinite and beyond in the ocean without any human watching me disappear. Thankfully I stopped panicking, hold onto the bodyboard, and faking swim like a maniac. When I reached the shore, I stood there like 20 minutes breathing. I was lucky the waves weren't trying their best that day. Couple of days more, my dad's wife's daughters got in the same rip current. That day the waves were a lot more aggressive. Meanwhile they were dragged into the ocean. Endless big waves were smashing their faces, waves after waves. They were saved by Baywatchers and a bunch more of people. Mid 2015 I was back at a girl's apartment after a date, around 1 AM and things were going well. We had been at a nearby bar, and she had driven us back to her place, a large apartment complex at the edge of town. It's an area I was totally unfamiliar with, but knew it was an unsafe area. There had been reports of break-ins and assaults in the neighborhood and we were in the midst of a crime spree. We were settling in on the couch and enjoying the evening. Suddenly we hear a pounding at the front door. We both freeze and hear it again. We slowly edge to the door without making a sound. Still the banging continues. I didn't know her well enough to know if this was normal, but we were in a dodgy part of town. She looks at me with an expression of part confusion and part fear. I have no idea what's going on, she whispered. I'm not expecting company. We hear a faint voice from the other side of the door whimpering, excuse me, I'm dead. The words were slurred and had a speech pattern I've never heard before. It was dark in the hallway and we were both concerned. The pounding continued with the same words, sorry, I'm dead. Your life is over. At this point we were both terrified. She shouted back at the voice, but the knocking continued. The door was chained, and we decided to open it to take a look at what was on the other side. Turns out it was a deaf guy who lives on the ground floor. Sorry, I'm deaf, he said. You've left your car headlights on, and it's shining through my bedroom windows and my kids are trying to sleep. Apparently deaf and lights sound a lot like dead and life when you're deaf and trying to speak. My dad once threatened to kill me and my whole family. Basically he was a drunken asshole, and one day he came downstairs after sleeping off his latest bender, said that he had finally snapped and that he was going to kill us all because he heard us laughing at him from upstairs. We had been laughing, but at The Simpsons on TV. He then started physically fighting with my mom. I went upstairs to where my younger brother was and told him to get some stuff together because we were going to escape the house through an upstairs window. I thought it was too risky to go through the front door as it was right next to the room where my dad was. We had dormer windows, so my plan was for us to slide down the roof slope until we hit the guttering, then shimmy across the guttering until we got to the neighbor's house and jump down into their garden. We didn't get that far because my dad came upstairs and told us he had killed our mom and that we were next and to go downstairs to look. He hadn't. The whole thing had just been to fuck with us. I of course didn't know that and had been fully prepared to risk my life and my brother's life by climbing out of a first floor window because that was the preferable option to being murdered by our own father. Afterwards he just went back to sleep. I was 13 years old and my brother was 9. When I was a kid, probably around 10 or younger, I had a friend of mine and his older sister and her friend over at my house. The older girls were babysitting us and my younger brother. My friend and I were playing on the computer when the two girls with my brother rushed into the room and closed the door. One of them asked what we were playing, while the other asked if we had anything to barricade the door and if it locked. Then they told us someone tried to force open the back door nearby where they were watching TV, so that's why they came in. Then we heard more doors being jarred and people yelling at us. We turn out the lights and lay on the floor so they don't see us through the windows, while one of the babysitters calls 911. She explains on the phone that multiple people are trying to break into the house with all of us in there. In the middle of this, the people outside start yelling out all of our names, and that's when I got really scared. Then the people start shining flashlights in the windows between the blinds. We have no clue what's going on, but then one of the girls recognizes the voice calling her name. Turns out it was the parents of my friend and his sister and some other friends of theirs. They decided it would be a good idea to pretend to be home intruders on their teenage daughter while babysitting 3 kids under 10. Needless to say, I was pretty shaken up after that and was always nervous to be in any part of the house by myself. I've gotten over it now. I think it's kind of funny in a why would they ever think that was okay kind of way, but it definitely freaked me out as a kid. I was pregnant, but not yet visibly so. My husband had a specialist medical appointment in Portland, 5 hours away. We only had one vehicle, but that was fine. There were 2 different convenience stores within a 5-minute stroll, plus our unincorporated, semi-rural neighborhood was just inside the delivery range for pizza and Chinese food. That's the setup. So, day 3 of Hubba's medical thing rolls by, and by noon I'm craving some hot dogs like a fiend. I decided to walk to the closest of the 2 convenience stores I got there, and they had the exact hot dog brand I wanted. I was in line when I noticed that they also had a very obscure soft drink I loved, so I bought some of that too. Last minute. Big heavy glass bottle. I was a couple of blocks into my walk home when a truck came up from behind me and then slowed down to my walking pace. Thinking maybe he couldn't get around me in the narrow dirt road, I moved into the shoulder and slowed down further. He slowed down further. I glanced over my shoulder, and the guy had a real sicko grin on his face, and he was eyeballing me in a way I can most succinctly describe as predatory. So I didn't hesitate. My only thought was for the little bean growing in my innards. I knew the only weapon I had was a huge glass jug of juice, so I grabbed it by the neck and held it like a club. I spun on that beach, looked him dead in the eye with the angriest face I could summon. I shifted into a fighting stance and hefted that bottle at my side, just a little, to indicate what was waiting for him if he tried whatever he was planning. It took all of an instant for his expression to change from perverse delight to pure nup. He left me in a spray of dust and gravel. I took my phone out to snap his plates, but he didn't have aim. This was in Coos Bay, Oregon, the worst place I've ever lived. In this stain of a town, I also overheard a woman getting killed in the woods near my house. Increasingly desperate screams of no and help and no please no for the 20 minutes it took for Leo to arrive, and then deathly silence. They didn't go looking. Call me crazy, but those were certainly the screams of someone dying violently in the woods. Either a cougar kill or a tweaker murder. Each seems as likely as the other. It was horrifying to realize that something or someone could just kill me with impunity in that place, and that no one would go looking for me if it happened. One last tale from Coos Bay. I was having my last smoke of the night on my porch around 11 PM. It was raining, being monsoon season, so I couldn't see much in the wet and dark outside of the porch area. Suddenly I started to feel really uncomfortable, like uncomfortable, so I hotboxed the rest of my ciggy. When I turned towards the door, I heard something moving fast down the roof, onto the carport, and straight towards me. I got inside in a split second, slammed the door and locked it. I had started shaking the second I heard it coming for me, so I'm still shocked/grateful I got inside so fast. In the exact moment the deadbolt slid home, I heard something thud softly on my porch and move around a bit. Doorknob rattled like it got slapped hard once with a hand the size of a baseball glove. And then there was no further activity. The next morning I was working in my garden, still wondering what the hell that was, when my neighbor over the fence popped up, like it's home improvement. He immediately launched in about seeing a large, unusually dark colored cougar hanging out in the trees behind our houses. It bared its teeth at him when he shone his flashlight on it, he told me, and it made him worry for our respective dogs. I told him straight away that it had stalked me the night before, and we agreed it was a particularly nasty cougar and to be wary until it left. It stuck around for about 2 weeks and noisily killed a few goats, and probably terrorized a few humans, before decamping for greener pastures. TLDR, Coos Bay is a lovely place to get murdered. Edited for formatting. My elder brother was always abusive when I was 22 and he 24. During an unhappy time of his life and coming down from drugs, he chased me around the house and out the front door with a steel pipe because we had disagreed on how to spend the last little bit of money in the household. It was the first time I ever called the police on someone. They arrived, kept him talking while I packed a bag, and they drove me to a friend's house. I was followed and nearly mugged, or worse, one night walking home during a transport strike. I'm not actually very streetwise, but I still picked up that someone was following me. I ducked into a lit office foyer with a visible security guard, and my follower strolled on, turning up a side street. When I resumed my journey, I looked back at one point, and the follower was back again. Their turn up the side street had been a ruse. They had just waited for me to pass that street when I resumed my journey, and they backtracked and started following me again. I sped up. They sped up. I sped up more. They sped up more. It was very frightening. In the end I reached a curve in the road, and when I was briefly out of his line of sight I faking legged it along the road to a junction and flagged down a taxi that was passing. I jumped in and told the driver my destination. He had to turn briefly back the way I had come. I hunkered down in the back seat and saw my follower again. He had reached the junction and had stopped and was looking around with a "where did he go?" expression on his face. I'm a big guy, but he still fancied his chances, meaning I bet he had a weapon on him. Either way, fuck that sheet. Once I was driving a large flatbed work truck through a small narrow tunnel when an Osaka water semi-truck came barreling through, speeding, and well into my lane. I twitched the steering wheel and somehow avoided a wreck I know without a doubt would have killed myself and my work partner. Right afterward the first thought I had was, that was almost it. After exiting the tunnel I pulled off to the side of the road and just sat there, hands frozen around the steering wheel. My partner and I just sat there silent, unmoving for about 10 minutes. When we got out and inspected the truck, both mirrors had been ripped off, and there were deep scrapes all along both sides of the truck. One side had tunnel-colored scrapes, the other had Osaka-colored scrapes. If I'd been even 1 inch more to the left or the right, that would have been it. I nearly died in a riptide on a trip I'd taken to visit my younger brother. My last thought was, wow, caught in a riptide only 20 feet from shore. What a dumb way to die. I hope my brother makes it to shore. Thankfully there were lifeguards who pulled us out in time. I told them, you must think we are stupid, and they said, no, it happens all the time here, several times a day. Geez, the most recent brush with death was the most peaceful, and because of that, the scariest. I was home alone, my spouse was out of town. I had some kind of episode, a stroke, shower, or something. I'm still not sure what. All I know is 1 minute I'm eating dinner and watching Netflix, and then, blackness. Nothingness. Next thing I know I'm laying on my back, eyes closed, and feeling so warm and content and at peace, and unable and unwilling to move. After a long time I was able to crack my eyes open, and realized I was laying on the floor in a pool of vomit and blood. I'd cracked my head open when I fell. But for some reason, this realization didn't worry me at all. I just felt warm and at peace, and allowed myself to drift back into oblivion. I thought for sure that was the end for me, but at the time I was strangely content with it. Waking up the next day was both a surprise and terrifying. Terrifying to know that I'd been completely fine with dying. Woke up to fire alarms going middle of the night. I always do take this seriously, even though our apartment was notorious for false alarms, 3 to 5 times a year. Startled because I'm such a light sleeper, I get up little annoyed and sighed loudly. Turned the light on and told my partner, get up, we gotta go. I go outside the bedroom and see smoke all along the ceiling. Immediately I clued in this isn't a false alarm. I now adamantly tell my partner it's time to go, and time go now. I get my sister up, who happened to be spending the night at our place. Tell her up and up right now. We gotta go, like right now. Probably in the matter of 30 seconds we were gone. Smoke is really thick outside our unit, and we make our way out of the building from the top floor of a 4-story. We get down and we see the unit behind us fully engulfed in flames. We cross the street and the roof over our unit is now engulfed. I say probably from when we left the actual unit and to crossing the street it was maybe 90 seconds. My partner is in tears. I just stare at the building as it burns, thinking thank God I'm a lightly sleeper and didn't turn my fan on that night, since I use it to drown out noise. My partner and sister are heavy sleepers, practically sleep through anything. Always take those alarms seriously, even though they can oftentimes be annoying and false alarms. Only takes one time. Also, people need to stop using flower pots as goddamn ashtrays. The second job I ever had was at a tiny family-owned store where there were never more than 4 employees at any one time. For a fair amount of time we had this creepy guy who would come in. His clothes were always clean, but his hair was always greasy, like he hadn't washed in a month. English wasn't his first language, and he had a pretty bad stutter, and he would occasionally spit on you as he talked. He would also come in and home in on my only female coworker, making no effort to hide the fact he was staring at her chest whenever he spoke with her. I believe she said he never made eye contact with her in all the time he came in. One day he stops coming in, and we're all happy. About 2 years later I'm working a new job 1 city over, and I run into the guy. He remembers me and my coworker. He freaks me the fuck out as he discusses my father and the cars he owns. I'm handicapped, and my father used to take me to work and pick me up from my old job. This dude had never come into the store anywhere near the beginning or end of my shift, so he had to have been keeping a watch on the store for some reason. About 2 years after that, the guy hires on as a temp worker where I work. Stares at me constantly and never says a word. I take down my name and personal stuff from my desk so he can't learn any more about me. My boss and coworkers mock me for this. A few weeks later, before his project is done, the guy disappears from the office. Management absolutely refuses to talk about why he's suddenly gone, and at the same time everyone stops making fun of me for being paranoid about him. It's been about 25 years since I last saw him, but if he did show up again it wouldn't surprise me. I can rant about this for days, but I'll keep it short as I can point. I have multiple heart issues, resulting in me having multiple surgeries and doctors, and a pacemaker. In high school, I spent almost a year having frequent dizzy spells. I went to the doctor several times telling them about my symptoms, and they never believed anything was wrong, because when they checked my pacemaker, they saw nothing out of the ordinary. After a particular incident where I basically passed out at school while talking to a teacher, I insisted on going to the doctor again. My old doctor retired, so I had someone entirely new. After brainstorming for a while, he came up with the idea of putting a heart monitor on me for 24 hours. Never had any dizzy spells while the monitor was on, but when they got the results back they frantically called my mom to say I needed to go to the hospital immediately. On the heart monitor they saw that my heart had stopped beating several times, the longest they were able to record being 14 seconds. In the end I was hospitalized for a few days, where the pacemaker techs found out one lead on my pacemaker was broken, and the pacemaker was performing routine checks on that lead by turning the only functioning lead off, effectively stopping my heart. Also, while I was at the hospital my heart stopped for about 18 seconds, scaring my nurse. I laughed and joked with her, can we go for 20 next time? She was not at all amused. I'm a city boy, as in I lived most of my life in a city and rarely ever visited the countryside. I'm also not a sports guy nor the hiker/adventure kind. This one time I was driving alone at night to a hill station. The drive was lonely as I didn't see any car in the past hour. Suddenly a truck from the opposite side rams into me and pushes my car off the road into a steep slope that eventually leads to a 400-foot drop. Applying the brakes wasn't helping, so I jumped out of the car. The car swerved a bit and eventually stopped after hitting a huge rock at the edge of the cliff. The scariest half an hour of my life begins when I realized that the truck driver didn't stop and I was alone in a remote foggy forest area on a cliffside. I could hear animal sounds nearby, wild dogs, birds and other animals. I'm pretty sure I even saw a snake. I check myself. My track pant is torn and I can't see skin on my leg. My shirt was semi-torn and is filled with blood. My face was bleeding as well. I realized that there was no help coming. I muster some courage and walk towards the road and walk on the road for some 15 minutes when a police patrol picks me up and takes me to a hospital. I stay in the hospital for 2 hours before being discharged. My friends came to pick me up and I partied that night for being brave enough. Not going into much detail, I've been trying to forget this stuff for nearly my whole life and the details are fuzzy. This isn't one single scary thing, but rather a collection of things that have been haunting me through my life, but they're all related, so I think it's related enough to the question point starting off strong. There's that time my father attempted to kill me with a snowmobile when I was like 6 or something. Long story short, he missed and I was able to hide in a snowbank before he could turn around and take another go at me. Must have been in there for a good couple hours before he left and I could walk home. Due to a combination of my age at the time, how frequently it pops up in my nightmares, and the fact that this was among the first, and thus most terrifying, attempts on my life, this ranks pretty highly on the things I really want to forget list. Second is the time when he broke into our house in the middle of broad daylight threatening to kill my mother. I remember running to the neighbor's house half dressed and begging them to call the police. The authorities removed him, but didn't arrest him or anything. They didn't believe that he was threatening murder. The cops around here are lazy and they let people go all the time. This event took place when I was 11. I think. The third thing is the fuzziest because I took a nasty hit to the head. I was somewhere between 12 and 14 at the time. My mother and I were driving somewhere when we noticed an erratic driver behind us. Of course, it was my father. He managed to force us off the road and into the ditch. Apparently we rolled quite a few times. Woke up in a hospital a few days later. Without video evidence or witness testimonies. He only got charged for driving without a license. Now, I want to be clear. He wasn't always that way. He was once a caring and compassionate father. Unfortunately, years of very poor self-care triggered a series of strokes that one by one caused his personality to almost totally flip. Over the years, he grew increasingly violent, and we eventually had to have him removed from the house. Even then, we weren't safe. Somehow, he always managed to find us. Even though he's Ash now, I feel like he's around every corner, waiting for his chance. I suppose years of paranoia do that to you. For our protection, my mother and I isolated ourselves as best we could. I only really left the house to attend school. Over time, I developed some severe social anxiety, trust issues, and depression that I'm still struggling with. It's only thanks to a couple friends I've gained in the past few years that I'm starting to break free of these issues. It's a long road, but for the first time in my life I feel like I can make it. Moral of the story: self-care is as important as caring for your child. Don't become a monster in your kid's life. The scariest experience I had as a kid, which remained the most terrifying experience of my life until an incident in adulthood, was sleep paralysis in my case. When I was 14, I was laying trying to get to sleep one night when I heard someone walk slowly into the room. There was a fabric sound as of a long dress or robe dragging on the carpet. The thing is, I knew it wasn't any of the family. My sister's door hadn't opened, my mother's bed made a noise when she got in and out of it, and my brother was sleeping in a bed in the same room as me. It was a presence that couldn't be accounted for. It walked around my bed, from the right side of it, around the bottom, to the left. I was laying on my left side, by the way. The sound stopped maybe 6 feet away from me. I was sweating with fear. I wanted to throw the covers off, but felt paralyzed with terror. I kept my eyes shut, feigning sleep, because I felt that if I opened them, I would see a face peering at me, close to mine. I'm in my 40s now, and I'm getting goosebumps just remembering how scared I was. There came two sharp knocks, as if it had rapped its knuckles on some drawers that were propped against the wall. There was nothing I could do, I just lay there as still as I could, hoping I wouldn't end up needing to go to the bathroom, and eventually fell asleep. Years later I read about sleep paralysis, and breathed a huge sigh of relief. I've experienced it a few times since, and although it was curious and unsettling each time, it was nothing like the panic and extreme terror I felt that night. At the time, it genuinely felt like I'd heard a ghost enter my room and move around. I was 7 and on a job site with my father, electrician, because I always thought his job sites were cool. We went to what was a small set of houses in the middle of the woods, and I was with my father, big and little sister. Big sister was 16 and my little sister was 6. Sure enough, once we get there we spot off in the distance or the woods an abandoned set of swings and a slide. They were very old, rusted, and nothing was around but the big hill you had to climb up to get to where my father was working. First day me and my sisters went there and played. Second day the same, and this continued until like the 4th or 5th day when we were on the swings pushing each other and I heard a gunshot. I played COD daily. I knew what a gunshot was like, or at least had some inkling of an idea. Something near me hits the ground and as some dust goes flying, I went into fight or flight and grabbed both my sisters and went for the hill to my father because I knew someone was shooting at us, but they had no clue what was happening. Sure enough, we get to the hill, another shot, then another, then another. There were 4 shots and thankfully none of them hit, but one grazed my shoe and left a small hole in the rubber, or whatever is on the bottom of it. Me and my sisters were all crying, running for our lives, and my sisters didn't know what was happening. They just knew to run as fast as they can, because I knew something was wrong and we were in danger. So we get to our dad, and he sits us down and calms us down, and we explain it. He says he will go down there and check while we wait in the house. He comes back and say there is nothing to worry about, and that it was a special system meant to shoot the ground to keep people off of private property. I ate the lie up cause I didn't know any better. But looking back on it, I was genuinely terrified and was unsure if I was going to live. Back when I was an electrician in the Navy, me and a buddy were connecting power cables from the shore to the ship. We called it shore power. These cables are as big or bigger than your arms. They pass enough power to supply the ship point anyways. It was a very misty kind of rain, so we had to take even longer than normal to get them ready. It involves wiping down the surface points of where the 2 cables connect together. Then we seal the connection with electrician's tape to make it watertight. We had only gotten half or more of them taped up when my forearm went numb, causing me to drop the cable I was working on. I was surprised, but didn't think too much about it because it felt like I just hid my funny bone, but I decided to be even more careful and finish that cable. I started on the next cable and this time it happened again, and I was sure my elbow didn't hit anything, so I immediately dropped the cable and stepped back. My buddy wanted to know what the deal was when it happened to him. We knew something was up, so we covered the connections with a garbage bag to keep the rain out and went down to the electrical plant watch to see what was going on. Apparently our chief and the division officer, though we had been up there long enough, so we must have been done by now, despite the fact that procedure required us to sound power phone call them to let them know we were finished, and that since it was raining procedure was going to take longer than normal. So they decided it was fine to connect the ship distribution system to the shore power facility to begin the process of shifting the load off the ship's power system so we could turn off the plant point. Lucky for us, they hadn't actually shifted the load yet, otherwise we would have likely died, probably vaporized or blown away. To say we were scared and pissed was an understatement, but our chief appeared more scared than we were and basically got us to not say anything. Now I wish I did. On the 4th of July, me and my family were at my grandmother's pond. We were shooting off fireworks, and before it got too dark we decided to head home so we could catch a big fireworks show not too far from their point. My grandma got in her golf cart, but the battery was dead. No big deal, she said. I'll go with Jean, Grandpa. She hopped into my grandpa's golf cart and then got out to open the gate. My grandpa has a bad leg though, and sometimes can't move it. My grandma opens the gate, and my grandpa drives through. She starts moving to the cart but too fast. He hasn't stopped it yet. He turns, trying not to hit her, but he turns the wrong way. My grandma falls to the ground. Meanwhile me, my dad, and my mom are behind them in a car screaming. My grandpa tries to back up, but didn't press reverse, and goes over her. Both sets of wheels go over her legs and chest. I'm frozen in shock whilst my parents jump out of the car to her side. My baby brother is crying, and my other brothers didn't see and have no idea what's happening. My mom calls the ambulance. My dad grabs a pillow and some water as well as a first aid kit and is just trying to keep my grandma conscious. That's when I get out of the car and walk over there. Every 2 minutes my grandma repeats the same questions. Where are we? What happened? Why does my leg hurt? We told her what happened every time. Soon, an ambulance arrived. My grandma's memory went back to fall of 2019 and she'd randomly laugh as if she just said the best inside joke, each time giving me a look that said it's okay, you'll understand later. Soon, the ambulance had her, and she was on her way to the hospital. They would only let one person go with her, so my mom went. Hands down the scariest experience of my life. I was working a labor job in a building that was split level. To access the basement storage you had to go through the parking lot and down a stairwell. It was a rough part of town, so at night the parking lot was normally full of druggies. So I'm down in the basement grabbing some product, and when I open the door there's a dude standing in the doorway staring straight through my soul. He pulls a knife, and I slam the door in his face. I lock and start barricading the entrance, while he's trying to break the door down, and shouting vague threats about killing me. He says something about a gun, so I book it to the back of the shop, arm myself with a box cutter, and hide behind some old equipment in a corner. There was no cell reception under street level, so I couldn't call for help. The parking lot drug users are normally pretty chill. You don't call the cops on them, they won't break your windows. They might even protect the place from other users for you. A couple of them apparently pulled the dude out of the stairwell, and once they realized it was me he was threatening, I was always nice to most of them. They beat the fuck out of him. A few days, and a new push knife for protection. Later, they dragged him up to me and made him apologize. He said he hadn't meant to scare me, which I guess they didn't think was good enough cause they hauled him away from me, and I never saw him again. Several years ago I was traveling in Ecuador. This wasn't unusual. I did a lot of work in Galapagos off and on over several years. I was at the airport late at night getting ready for a flight home and was at the gate waiting for my boarding to start any minute. It was late, maybe 10 p.m. Suddenly, my name is announced over the speaker along with a few other names. I don't really speak Spanish very well at all, so I didn't know why, but I went to the gate attendants and announced myself, and they pointed to the door that lead out to the runway. About 6 of us will lead out to the tarmac, where police were waiting for us. The police in Ecuador are militarized, so they all have assault rifles, fatigues, grenades, etc. Without instruction we were walked past airplanes along part of the runway into an active baggage area, where there were about 30 armed police with several German shepherds, and a desk set up with an officer seated at it. On the desk was my suitcase. It suddenly occurred to me that no one knew where I was, and I was certain I was about to be shown drugs were placed in baggage, and I didn't have any idea what would happen next. I was waved up to the officer, where he took my passport and started asking me questions. But I didn't understand what he was asking. He started taking everything out of my bag and asking me more questions, but all I could respond was I'm sorry, I don't understand. He then dumped my entire bag on the ground and kicked every item apart while I surrounded by other police. Eventually, he muttered something, handed me my passport, and pointed to go stand to the side. I was then led back to the plane and flew home. I don't know what happened to the other 5 people, but I'm glad I didn't wind up under a boot or worse. I've had a few very scary crazy things that were scary and cheating death. I can't pick one that was the scariest, so I will give the gist of a few of them. Ricochet to the head. I was shooting my shotgun in the wood for the hell of it when I did something incredibly stupid. I tried to point blank a tree, but what I didn't think of is that the bullets will bounce off of each other. One hit me about a centimeter above my eye, just right at my eyebrow. It did happen to have enough force to go in my head, not enough to go through bone, but it knocked me out, and if it could have gone through my skin, definitely cold gone through my eye. Getting shot at by a landowner when my horse started to go down a no driveway and I couldn't get it to stop. The guy just started shooting 3-point cleaning dove with a friend in a open field with tall grass with a pack of coyotes sneaking up on us. My friend and I had just finished a dove hunt with a bunch of friends. We were cleaning all the dove. I had a shotgun, but that's it, because I didn't take it off of the four-wheeler from earlier. Well, we had bloody water and a bunch of dove. At 11 o'clock at night we had to lights on our head, and that's it. I finally looked up and thought this has to be attracting something. So I look up into the field and I see low eyes, prefect size for a coyote, too small to be a deer. Then I see about 4 more pairs of eyes just behind him, and they weren't running along, it was a pack of coyotes sneaking up on us. I grabbed my shotgun and loaded it while telling my friend I took shot and hit one in the face, maybe not enough to kill him because of all of the grass. So the bullets are getting stopped, but I hit him because I heard a yelp. Then we saw him running. About 2 minutes later they were closer. We dropped the keys on accident and had to find those. I stood guard while my friend cleaned the dove. I killed a coyote, shot another, and finally they ran off. Point watching my mom sees throw up blood, pass out, and be not expected to live. Luckily she did after 9 days in ICU. Not the scariest that has happened to us, but it still wasn't fun. My friend, 17F, A, and I, 18 almost 19F, B, went to a slightly older cowhawker's, 23 meters, C, house on my birthday. I kinda liked him. He was cute and charming, but something was off about him. I didn't trust my gut because I wasn't in a good place mentally. When we get over to his apartment, he starts talking about kinks that he likes. My friend and I respond jokingly, while both internally planning our escape, while silently communicating with each other from across the room. He offers us a smoke. My friend took him up on his offer. I didn't. I needed to drive. When they come back and he says, "You all wanna see something really kinky?" No, not really. We gotta get going, CO, come on. It'll only take a minute. And he runs to his room. He comes out with a pair of fuzzy handcuffs and a blindfold. He deadass tries to get my friend and I to put them on. He was being serious and tries to grab our arms to lock them on. He also said he has another pair and some ball gags in his room. My friend and I are having none of this. But we are 2 teens against a trained military soldier. So my friend starts acting really high, and I'm like, "Oh shit, we need to get you home." And C is like, "Oh no, she's fine," as she's wobbling around making airplane noises. And she's like, "Let's call D, her boyfriend," and starts giggling. I pitch him a quick goodbye and we leave. Once we're in the car I'm saying, "Hey, are you actually high? Come down for a minute please." She immediately snaps back and says, "Oh, I'm not high at all. I just faked it so we could leave." We both start laughing. Later on we talked about how creepy he was and how lucky we were to get out of there. I moved into my new house and it was brand new. Now new houses tend to make weird noises because all the things inside your house were just put together and all that, so naturally you shouldn't be surprised the first few months when you hear strange noises. I didn't know this. I was chilling in the game room at around 10 AM playing some Gears of War 4 when I start to hear clown chuckles from downstairs. I brush it off the first time, but then I started to hear more sounds that just didn't make sense to my 11-year-old self. I start thinking if I was being robbed or if somebody entered my house. I didn't want to go downstairs because the scary movies taught me not to, so I take off my headphones and call my parents. My parents answer the call and I tell them what had just happened. Them worrying for my safety told me to call 911 and said they're heading back home right now. I did, and I was already 5 minutes into the call with an operator when the garage doors open. It's my parents. They call my name from downstairs, so I immediately can tell there was no threat. My dad takes my phone and explains what happened to the operator. She said it was no big deal, and we hung up. It turned out my sister was watching a YouTube video or something on loud volume and I didn't know she didn't go with my parents to the store. TLDR. Got scared shitless because my sister played clown noises. I think I already told this story, but when I was in the 5th grade, I was walking my dog around my neighborhood. I was nearing the neighborhood park and was about to go turn and do a loop in a dead end when I noticed a silver van slow in front of me and then drive off. So I got suspicious and instead turned the other way and took a route through a park that people not familiar with the neighborhood wouldn't know where it led. However, at the end of the route was the silver van. I kind of slowed down for a bit and considered my options, whether I could climb over a neighbor's fence. A woman got out of the van and she walked towards me. She didn't look very threatening, so I kind of waited to see what was going on. She told me that they had been following a red car after noticing it following me for a while, stopping in people's driveways and then following me. When I got further, I thought back and remembered seeing the red car pass by me first before the silver van, so I believed her. She offered to drive me home, but I refused. Instead they drove by me as I got to my neighborhood street and then I told them they could go. I sprinted all the way back home after that. A few days later, there was reports of a red car hanging around elementary schools. Not the first time I've almost been kidnapped, but it was definitely the scariest. 18, dumb as a rock, was visiting our sister community in an African country. Not voluntarism, it's mostly a team of grown men and women who are there to consult on their chosen field, not to take local jobs. I and another girl were there for a culture exchange and develop relationships for the next gen point. After we are done with the work we do the fun tourism stuff and go to a beautiful lake. The girl decides she wants to go to the local bar and I agree. We go and meet these guys. We have fun, but it gets late and they offer to walk us home. We are walking in our pairs when my guy grabs my hand and says, "Come with me, I want to show you something." He drags me into this courtyard filled with men on benches. There's door off into different rooms. The men aren't eating or drinking, just smoking and waiting. The guy shows me a bucket and says that's where their beer is made. All the men are watching me. One stands up and shouts at the guy. The guy shouts back. I start to realize that I think I'm in a brothel and this is probably how I'll die. I just freeze. They keep shouting and gesturing. No one is looking at them. They are looking at me. My friend and the other guy are nowhere to be seen, and this guy still has my hand. He's widely gesturing, and I'm being yanked every time he does. It kind of breaks my freeze, so I start trying to pull away, but I've no idea how to get back to friend. Then I see her storm in with her guy. We quickly leave and the guys follow. They walk us home, but first there's some making out and groping attempts. That I flee from point, standing in that courtyard with about 50 men staring at me and having no idea how to save myself is the most scared I've ever been. When I was 14 I was a rather petite girl, middle of the school day at another school for a small football tournament. Our coach was supposed to get us back to school after we got eliminated, but she decided to stay at the tournament a bit longer and basically made two older girls promise they'd walk me to the tram stop. From the tram, I would have a straight walk home, and mind you, I was commuting everywhere by myself by then, so all involved thought it's just a stupid school safety rule. The tram stop was the one at the end of the line, and it happened to be in the forest, so people can commute to the forest hiking trail / sport facilities. The trams would wait there for like 10 minutes and then begin their route into opposite direction. The older girls obviously ditched me as soon as they could, as they were going somewhere else. So I walked into the waiting tram, into the second carriage with no driver, and sat in the middle of it. Someone else walked in through the last door just after I sat down, so I instinctively lifted my head. I saw a scruffy looking guy, then I immediately noticed him flashing his dick out of his trackies. He played with it while he walked towards me as I just froze in shock, and just before he reached my seat, he made a turn and walked out of the middle door I was sitting by. I was horrified and ran into a first carriage to sit by the driver's door, and I never saw where the guy went. I haven't even told anyone, as I was not even supposed to be left alone at that time by my teacher and my team members. But I still Have the image in my mind 7 years later, and I dread to think what would have happened if the tram wasn't waiting at the time. I know I should have reported it, but it didn't occur to 14-year-old me. Still, my blood boils every time someone downplays the amount of sexual harassment incidents girls face, because every one of my friends has a story like that or similar, and most didn't report it anywhere, because they were too shocked at the time / it was a random encounter which couldn't be investigated. When I was little, like 10/11ish, I would wake up in the middle of the night and have a really bad runny nose that would soak my blankets. Well, one night it happens again, but this time it was oddly more runny than usual, and I'm starting to feel like I just walked into the shower with my clothes on, or I'm just extremely sweaty. I get and go to the light switch, and when I do, I see blood on my hands, cloths, carpet, and bed. Everything was soaked, and my nose was still bleeding. Now at the time I didn't see what was wrong, but I walked into my mum's room trailing blood with how soaked my clothes were, and said that I had an accident. My mom freaked out, and her being a nurse, went and looked to see where the blood was coming from, and yelling at my brother to get the first aid. It was something out of a horror movie is what my brother said, because of the little drops of blood trailing from my room to my mom's in the most ominous way possible, with little footprints here and there. Not to mention I was swallowing like crazy because the blood was also going down the back of my throat, and it was making me cough it out. Apparently, an artery that I don't know the name of burst from all the rubbing and messing with my nose. I'm fine now, but have a lot of bloody noses during the summer and winter. I figured out how to not wake up with one, so I don't need to buy new sheets all the time, and am a lot more healthy. Sorry I don't remember that much, it was almost a decade ago. Short story. Cancer. Long story. I was diagnosed when I was 9, but things started getting bad about 6 months before, when I started getting dizzy spells so bad that my entire world rocked, and I had to drop to the floor and close my eyes and wait for it to stop. Of course, since I was a kid I didn't tell anyone. I'd also been in and out of the hospital several times over the previous couple years due to severe dehydration. The doctors just wrote it off as the flu. It wasn't until I dropped like a rock at the local park that my mom took matters into her own hands and made an appointment with an MRI specialist. Turns out I had a brain tumor, medulloblastoma to be precise, right at the base of the brainstem. I was rushed to a hospital and it was surgically removed, but that was just the beginning. It is very hard to understand if you have not been through it yourself, but basically for the next 2 years I was in and out the hospital on a weekly basis for radiation and chemo, and this sheet is horrible. Basically cancer therapy amounts to trying to kill a fly by tossing a grenade at it. Chemo is lethal poison and radiation is, well, radiation. You're just killing everything and hoping you kill any lingering bad cells without killing too many good ones. As a result, during those 2 years I lived in a perpetual state of nausea and weakness. It was hell. I still have lasting bad memories and associations to this day, over a decade later. And you wanna know the worst part? Even after everything I went through, they cannot guarantee it won't come back eventually. And I can say with certainty that, if it ever did, I would rather accept death than go through all of that again. I've been in 2 severe car accidents. The first one happened when I was only 20. This happened a few days after a heavy rainstorm. I was driving home with my 3-year-old child late one evening. I had been driving a while, and I was tired and ready to get there. I rounded a curve and didn't notice that the road had washed away. When my SVU hit the water, it sputtered and died. Water starts coming in from the doors and I realize that the SUV is drifting towards the ditch, which was a straight down drop off. I flipped around in the back seat because all I'm thinking is get out now. I somehow managed to yank my son's straps straight off the car seat. I had to kick the door open because of the rushing water and I literally jumped out, and then it hit me. I didn't know how to faking swim. I couldn't feel a bottom, and I'm holding up my baby as best as I can above my chest, kicking as hard as I can to just keep us above water. I still don't know how I didn't drown or get bitten by a snake or alligator or injured in that damn water, but I somehow managed to get us to an edge of the broken road and pull us out. That was terrifying, and I still have dreams about not making it to that edge point last year. However, I got into a car accident that truly changed my life. I was going to pick up my sister. I was 7 months pregnant with #4, and I had my 3-year-old and 2-year-old in the backseat. All I remember is that my 3-year-old said mama, and I glanced in the rearview mirror and glanced back at the road, and a truck had pulled off a side road right in front of me. The driver wasn't paying attention and didn't see me. I had no warning, no time to brake, 2 seconds to look up and look back, and I tore right into this little pickup truck at 65 miles per hour. I hit the steering wheel so hard, and I remember fighting to stay awake. I didn't have time to think. I just undid my seat belts and crawled into the back and started checking them babies. I got them out of their car seats, out of the SUV, and then my water broke in the middle of the street, and I got intense labor pains. I got my kids off the road, and they sat in my lap on the side of the road while I was waiting for an ambulance. Luckily, they were untouched. Not a scratch on them. But I had a concussion, a fractured sternum, a mangled right knee, and a 3rd-degree seatbelt burn across my waist, which the doctors had to cut into that burn to perform an emergency C-section to save #4, because he was hurt pretty bad too. That second one may have been more terrifying and traumatic to me though, because I lived through that what if they had been killed moments for months after, and that is a pain I could not have lived through. I lived in a house that was on a steep hill with a road that curved around at the bottom. At the time, I drove a smaller SUV that had 4-wheel drive. At the time, I drove to the store one day and it was bright and sunny. When I came out of the store, it had gotten really cold and had started snowing. I figured it wouldn't be a problem and switched my SUV into 4X mode to make the trip home. I was only about 15 to 20 minutes away from my house and figured it wouldn't be a problem. Unfortunately, the weather was much worse where I lived, and not only had it been snowing, but the road was a sheet of ice. I slowly made my way down the hill, and I swung wide to get into the driveway, which was normally what I had to do when it snowed. Except, I didn't get into the driveway. When I turned to get into the driveway, my tire slid, and I kept turning until I was sliding backwards down the hill. I tried as hard as I could to get righted, and ended up nearly going into a steep ditch across the road. Luckily, there was a driveway right next to it. I figured maybe I could get into my lower driveway, so I tried to pull back across the road, but my tires started sliding again, this time going forward down the hill. I really couldn't control where it was sliding at all, despite all attempts, and was terrified that I would slide headfirst into one of the cars parked down the hill. I was sliding on a diagonal and closed my eyes, trying to relax for the inevitable impact, when the car stopped. I had come to rest on a curb about 6 inches shy of someone's truck. Driving in a whiteout in the middle of winter in the mountains. There's a notoriously terrible highway in BC that's just unpredictable, but I always have great winter tires and emergency kits, and I take it slow and honestly never use this highway if I can avoid it. It's about a 4-hour drive. First 3 hours was clear skies and no problem. Last hour, the whiteout hit almost instantly. I have extremely sensitive eyes and was getting black spots all in my vision because everything around me was just pure white, but this highway is always full of truckers. It is never safe to pull over, and even with hazards on, you wouldn't see someone until they were right in front of you. I kept hazards on and drove as slow as I could while keeping an eye on the bits of road I could see, which was also covered in snow. I caught up to another car that clearly had better vision than I did, so I kept decently close to this car, so I had some guide through this. Unfortunately, this driver and every other faking driver on this highway drives 80 to 100 km/h even in bad weather. So I spent an entire hour gripping my steering wheel, sobbing, and having to go way faster than my comfort zone, just so I could keep the guide car in front of me. Also, this highway is completely surrounded by winding cliffs. If at any point the road ended, it was almost 100% over an embankment and down the mountain. There's no reception for cellular service. Until the age of 4, I lived in an old lower income neighborhood that was in slow decline. The small house we lived in sat on a corner and had a rear detached garage. The side street was more of an alley and was mainly used for kids going back and forth between 2 streets. My bedroom window faced the side street and there were vines that covered more than half my window, but I could see through to the side yard and street. One night my mom must have forgotten to pull my shade, and I laid in my bed across the room looking out the window. It bothered me that the shade was up, and throughout the night I would wake up and look. Each time it was the same, vines, branches, and faint light from the corner street light illuminating the neighbor's fence across the street. At one point I woke and stared at the window for a long time. My brain finally sensed something wrong and my vision clicked into focus at one part of the vine-covered portion of the window. There were eyes staring at me through a gap in the vines. My 4-year-old self suffered a silent heart attack as I clenched my eyes shut and moved under the blankets. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but sometime later that morning actually, our doorbell rang. I heard it and jumped from bed and moved down the hall. I have an image of my dad standing by the door, pistol in hand, saying, "Who is it?" My dad never answered the door, and at that point I told my mom about the face in the window. The police investigated, and they discovered that somebody had also attempted to light a garage on fire. As far as I know, they never caught the person and my parents had no known enemies. So apparently some random, creepy stranger decided to peep in my window before ringing our doorbell at 4 a.m. and attempting to light a garage on fire. I was running drugs back in the day. I was young and stupid and had no other ideas. I knew the right people to get into the work. The biggest thing I had going for me was I didn't look like your typical runner. I was too clean cut and drove an unassuming vehicle. About a week in, I get sent out for a pickup from a lab about 25 miles deep in the sticks. Nice old farmhouse. Owner ran a side hustle farming crickets and night crawlers. Good cover. So, as I'm pulling up into the drive, an older woman waves me up to a barn. I park in front of it, and as I'm getting out of my vehicle, a distinct forceful clicking sound forces me to stop mid-movement. My hand slowly rises. A voice begins instructing me to back up slowly and keep my hands above my shoulders. "You're new, and you're not federal. I don't want your name, just answer one question." I was given an answer before I left, which was fortunate, because I was not told I'd have a gun pointed at me. "What's that smell?" My throat started to dry up as the words left my mouth. "Sorry, I've got whiskey fingers." A few seconds go by like hours as I question everything I've done in my life to lead me to this. And he says those words. "Oh, you're Whisker's new boy. Haha, head-on kid. That was the last job I did running meth. I'm real happy I grew up." I have two. The first one was when I was like 8 and my family went to the beach and I went swimming in the ocean, mostly by myself, and when I went to like stomach height this huge wave that was bigger than me came, and I was turning to run back, and then I remembered my mom telling me to face the waves, so I did, and I asserted my faking dominance in that wave, and got submerged for like 30 seconds and I couldn't see anything, and I couldn't even do anything, because I was in shock, and then I was brought up to shore by the waves. Then I avoided the ocean for like a year. My second one was scarier. I'm gonna give you my perspective first in it though. I was like 10 or 11, and I was at my neighbor's birthday party, and it was near Spooktober, Halloween, so we wore costumes. I was a dementor. So eventually we started playing hide and seek in the dark. I was the seeker for a round and someone his up a tree. The next round I decided I would climb it. Now my costume was rain boots and this huge blanket cloak thing. It was big. I want super big. So when I was in the tree I decided to climb higher and further. I'm the dumbest costume ever. And that's pretty much how I remember it. The rest of it was surprise. I fell out of the tree. And guess what I landed on? My head. From like 20 feet in the air. My sister saw me cool and told my mom, who ignored he for a minute, and then everyone went kind of crazy. I got knocked out and the hot up like 10 minutes later. I was like, what happened, what? And they would tell me, and a minute later I would forget that and everything and would flash back and I couldn't remember anything. I remember waking up in my parents' car while we were driving to the doctor and they were like, "Are you back?" And I had no ducking clue what they were talking about, and I thought I was in a dream, and then I was back. I went to the doctor with a weird faking costume and no shoes, and a concussion, and they said I'd be fine. They were pretty faking scary to me. Senior year of high school, my friends and I were planning on going to a friend of a friend's party, each of us saying we were sleeping at the other's house, alternating them so our parents didn't find out. Well, lo and behold, the party got cancelled, so we were stuck just driving around our hometown. Eventually, around midnight, we took a bathroom break at a pretty nice 24-hour gas station plus mart. While we were waiting for the single stall room thing to be free, we could hear bottles clinking inside. When the door finally opened, a middle-aged man came out, and as soon as he saw us, a sadistically sinister grin crept across his face. "Well, hello girls," he said. "What are you ladies up to this late at night? Isn't it past your bedtime?" My friends and I stood there absolutely shocked, unable to move. I swear to God this guy looked like a pedophile, possibly even a serial killer. He continued to offer us some drinks he had bought at the mini-mart, all the while staring at us like a feral dog would a nice slab of meat. It was horrifying. He walked away when our responses didn't go beyond one word point, so we threw ourselves into this bathroom, looking at each other wide-eyed and silent, knowing what the other. When we were done, and were about to leave, we saw him leaning against a car a spot or two away from us, just outside of where the lights shone. Needless to say, we freaked the fuck out. I went up to the woman behind the counter and told her what had happened and asked to see if she would walk us to the car, but she couldn't because she was the only one working and wasn't able to leave the register unmanned. She did, however, say she'd watch us in the cameras with a phone, ready to call 911. We walked to the door, took a deep breath, and full on sprinted to the car. We immediately got in, not paying attention to the area beyond the car. Our sole goal was to make it inside. When we looked around, after locking the doors, we saw that he was gone. I'm pretty sure the car he was leaning against wasn't even his, because it remained in its parking spot, off. Anyways, we left and ended up in the high school parking lot intermittently sleeping until some boys we knew invited us to their house nearby. Every once in a while, one of us will bring up the story, and every time it makes my spine cold. Not a shiver. Straight up cold from fear. It's currently happening as I'm typing this. None of us know what that guy may have had planned, and I for one, really don't want to. It terrifies me to this day, 6 years later. I hope he didn't succeed or follow through with whatever he may have been thinking with any other teenage girl, or boy for that matter. That same night, we also happened to come across a barn burning down, fully engulfed in flames. Luckily, no one was hurt, I'm pretty sure. I haven't had that insane of a night since, and I hope I never do, knock on wood. It was fucking whack. I realize that I'm capable of killing another person, that our impulses are so strong, that you can go from hello, tired, drunk and super chill to kill you, and almost doing it in less than 10 seconds without any visual confirmation or general knowledge about it. My dad's wedding, we had seen the sunrise on top of a mountain. We are on our way back. My cousin, she is first down to the house and walks in. I'm 30 yards behind her. She yelled in a way I have never heard before. Something within me triggered. There was no question about it. All my primal senses are full on fight or flight mode, and there is not a chance in hell I would run away. A 52-year-old woman was wrapping her 12-year-old brother. I entered the house and a 5L pot was right next to northeast, and I was determined to kill her. I was about to smash her skull in. Remember, I know nothing, as I started to swing my entire body. Every goddamn cell yelled no. I somehow managed to make a longer swing and threw it on the body part. One knew she'd take no damage. Her fat, disgusting thigh. I broke down, left the house for 8 minutes to gather myself. We then took the woman and left the party and started walking towards the city, called the cops to come pick her up. When we got back 1h later, nobody cared. His parents laughed it off. The 50 guests still staying there for the weekend shook it off. He got zero support from the adults. If this was a 50-year-old man and a 12-year-old girl, I would be questioned to why I didn't kill him. Not sure what was pissing me off the most, my ignorance to impulses or the nonchalant way the others handled it. That was the first and only time I've heard that kind of yell. August 13, 2012. I jumped into the Columbia River about 1/4 of the way out, and I went pretty deep. I jumped off this weird log structure that went out a ways, and was maybe 1.5 feet out of the water. I didn't understand that there are currents under the water, and it spun me, and disoriented me and moved me. I didn't really understand which way was up, confusing because you naturally float up. Naturally I panicked, and tried my best to swim up. I inhaled water just a second before finally reaching the surface. I don't know how long I was under the water. When I made it to the surface, the only way to get out of the water was to somehow latch onto the log that was barely reachable in the water and pull myself up. I had so much adrenaline that I yanked myself out of the water. I still couldn't breathe. I just sat there choking and puked in the water. I knew I had to calm down, so I did exactly that, and slowly I was able to breathe more and more. I was 12 years old when I did this. I also weighed like 170 pounds. I was very overweight, so I had no idea how I was even able to pull myself onto that log. I sat there for about an hour trying to catch my breath point before anyone says anything about my parents being irresponsible. I literally waited till no one was watching to prove that I could do it. This could also fit pretty well in r/kids are fucking stupid. I was in the 2006 Danvers chemical explosion. A solvent factory blew up in a residential neighborhood with the force of a 2,000-pound bomb. My field is industrial automation, which can mean some odd hours. That week, I was on an installation that couldn't start until 4 p.m. By midnight on my second day, the project was almost done. Instead of coming back on Wednesday, I remained on site to finish up that evening. The shift manager was thrilled. I left around 2:30 a.m. tired, but glad the work was completed. There was nobody on the highway. Then it happened. I must have heard the sound, but I can't fully remember. I just remember the sensation that something is going horribly wrong, and suddenly all my joints ached, like I had some kind of terrible flu. I thought I was going to be sick. My truck was pushed into the left lane. It felt like crosswinds on a mountain highway, just way more severe. I'm pretty strong, but I couldn't hold against this force. Then I see the fireball. Orange flames stretch over the height of the trees. I got off at the closest exit. The flames were stretching further into the sky. The fire marshal said they were 200-foot flames. They may have been even higher. I got out of my car. The feelings of sickness had gone away. I was lucky I didn't hit anyone. Truck was okay. A small crowd had gathered in the parking lot of a shopping mall. The fire was near an old propane terminal. The people gathered were speculating that the terminal blew up. What exploded was a solvent-based paint factory. It was near the old propane terminal, which been recently decommissioned, and all propane had been removed. Had that terminal still been in active use, I made it home without issue. I lived less than 2 miles from the blast site. A small rock wall had partly fallen over from the blast. There were no deaths. Fortunately, almost everyone was asleep. Their bodies were relaxed, so even the people who had windows blasted in onto their beds still managed to survive without major injuries. I'm okay, but that was scary as hell. 10/10ths would not do again. Had a friend stay the night with me one night when we were 12 and 13, and we had snuck out and went and egged some classmates' house because we're young and dumb, and came back to my house when we heard police sirens. So we waited for the coast to be clear and decided to head back out into the streets because we hadn't had enough excitement for the night. So we walk across the town, which is fairly big, which took about an hour and a half, and we walk into a 24 hours Waffle House because we both needed to piss, and at this point it's about 2:30 in the morning. He goes into the bathroom first, and a young man walks up behind me and asks if I'm waiting on for the restroom, to which I replied, yes sir I am. And my friend comes out the bathroom and the guy asks if he can cut ahead because he only needs to wash off his hat. I reply to which yes he could, and he goes in and comes out promptly and leaves the restaurant. I go and piss, and at this point we leave the store, and the same guy's in a beat up old truck and follows us as we're leaving the parking lot, and he pulls up beside us and asks how old we were, and my first thought is that he was our undercover cop trying to catch truant teenagers like us. So out of instinct I reply 16, and my friend replies that he's 17. He says cool, y'all do any drugs, and we say we don't, and he asks us if we can go into the convenience store and get him some mojo. Mojo is street slang for synthetic marijuana where I'm from, and we tell him no. He then asks us if we need a ride anywhere, and at this point we both get a little nervous as we're both pretty scrawny boys. We know he's not a undercover at this point because of the vehicle he's driving, and tells us that we should get in his truck and he'll take us wherever we need to get to, and we tell him no thank you, and he says y'all should really get in my truck, and we said no, we are not going that far anyway, and he asks if there was anything he could get us, and quick thinking I said yeah, do you know where I can get some weed? And he says yeah, wait right here, and I'll bring you some, and we agree, and he pulls out swiftly, and we start haul-assing it across town. We don't get 1,000 yards, and we see his truck coming towards us rather fast, and we run to a hotel not far where we were and are hiding in the parking lot, when he turns in and me and friend start pulling on door handles, so we can find a place to hide and one truck. Door opens so we climb inside a stranger's vehicle at this hotel and lock the doors as his truck turns down the row of parking that we were on. He makes his rounds, and after about 5 minutes doesn't find us and leaves. Once we determine it's safe to get out we hop out and run the entire way back to my house constantly checking over our shoulders looking for this guy. We make it home safely, and at this point we are so shaken up we decided it was best to just go to bed. Looking back now we were very reckless and stupid. When I was around 10 to 12 years old, I attended my grandpa's funeral. My mom's side of the family all lives in Illinois except for her, so we made the 4-hour drive out, attended the services, went to see him lowered in. All that unfun stuff. Right by the graveyard was a house where you could eat with everyone attending. Me, my younger sister, and a few of our cousins decided to wander into the cornfield that was behind the house. We all go in, and my sister and one of our younger cousins stay near the edge and make sure they can get out okay. Me and the 3 other older cousins decide to go in a bit further. Now at this age, I wasn't totally stupid, so I tried to keep track of our turns to ensure that we didn't get lost. Fast forward just a couple minutes and we are totally faking lost like holy shit, no one will hear us, we are gonna die out here lost. We are all scrambling, panicking, trying to find where the hell the road or the house is, and suddenly my simultaneously ingenious yet stupid as sees something. It's a goddamned wooden electrical pole, and what do those things always run along roads? So I grab my cousins and tell them that the road has got to be right there. We run towards it and sure enough, there's the road. We had turned ourselves around and ended up walking in the opposite direction that we thought we did, and it was quite a ways down the road. We walked back and obviously my parents told us we were stupid. But all was okay. In 2017, I came forward to my family about my dad being a creep towards me. My mother chose to believe him, so I went low contact to try and focus on therapy and heal. Right before Christmas that year, my mom's cancer, which had previously been in remission for a good few years, completely engulfed her, taking over her liver and bones. It was so severe that chemo would have immediately killed her. I came back into her life in time to watch her fade away, lost her right after New Year's 2018, and skipped mourning to focus on my dad stalking me. He creeped on me at the funeral in front of everyone. He bought a .9mm pistol as of arm and shooter despite already having a .22 rifle and a hunting rifle. He started showing up to my house at random, especially when he knew my grandparents were gone, which was made more frightening by the fact that I was renting half a duplex from my grandmother. A door connected her half of the house to mine, and she also had the key to the front entrance of my side of the house. Naturally, just like my mother, she'd opted to take my father's side too. This meant he had access to my home through her virtually any time he wanted, and I could do jack shit about it. Scariest of all was the fact that I lived 2 miles down the road from him. When I went to the police to document what was going on, they told me, you can try to file for a personal protection order, but at the end of the day, it's just a piece of paper and he could get to you before we even thought about driving out there. I lived in a very rural area, so the police department was split between 3 different counties, all of which spanned quite a bit of farmland and wooded area. I also didn't have a car, no friends, and no family who wouldn't tell him exactly where I was if I asked for their help, which meant I had no way out. It escalated to me having to couch surf and take a leave from work, and to me attempting to get him involuntarily committed to psychiatric care. He texted me suicide threats while he was being interviewed, even though they are supposed to confiscate personal belongings, but they decided there was nothing wrong with him. I still have those texts saved to my phone, and I kept the police report. I can't explain how hopeless and trapped I felt, or what constantly being that kind of hypervigilant did to my health. I would stay up all night staring out my windows and watching the door, and I had to survive like this for 3 months while I made plans to get out. I couldn't eat or clean or concentrate on anything. He went absolutely ballistic when I couch surfed, and he couldn't find me, and of course when I moved. I had to sneak into his house to grab a portion of my mother's ashes because he withheld them from me. I still have them in the mason jar I scooped them into. I was genuinely sure I wouldn't survive the whole thing, but I did. I moved across the country to get away from him and lost the rest of my family in the process of trying to protect myself. He's continued to harass me via email over the past 2 years and tried every card to manipulate me into contact, including falsifying mysteriously vague claims that he was going to die soon. He was super pissed when I asked my brother what he knew about that. He found my personal blog and sent me an email detailing entries I'd made about him from 2 years ago. I save everything he emails me to a specific folder as proof in case I ever need to pursue that restraining order I've bounced across 3 different states over the past 2 years, but he always finds a way to figure out where I am. Currently, I live about 6 hours away from where he and his family reside, and I know he knows the specific city I'm located in as well as the company I work for, so I'm always keeping watch. One time I swore I saw him in my drive-thru, and I had a panic attack, so severe I was off the floor for 30 minutes and had to stay in the back doing dishes for the rest of my shift. I'm careful, but I try not to let it rule my life now. The whole experience has definitely tainted true crime a bit for me, though. Dog attack. I was walking home after getting groceries, and this 4-month-old puppy is lunging, straining on its leash, growling and barking up a storm. Unfortunately for me, I cannot just cross the street unless I felt like playing Frogger in a high traffic area. So I decide to keep an eye on the dog but keep moving slowly, no sudden movements, hoping the owners would come out. It snaps its tether with enough force that it barrels into the road, somehow doesn't get hit, almost does, and goes for my leg. At this point, I'm an unarmed short noodle of a guy with a plastic bag full of groceries, and wrangling with a stranger's dog isn't in my list of skills, so naturally I end up yelling for help and pissing myself. Owner finally comes out and grabs the dog, goes inside their house, and does not come back out, so I head home to drop her some groceries and then file the report. The dog was known to be aggressive, apparently, but they left it outside without supervision with no excuse given. It had its rabies shot, and as far as I know the family either moved or didn't let the dog out of their sights from that day forwards. I didn't press charges because I love dogs, but now, living with the aftermath, I really wish I did. Do you know how big a pain in the ass it is to have nerve damage in your leg and be afraid of dogs when you grew up with a few? I'd go to therapy for my fear, since this incident happened 2 years ago, but every therapist in the area has no clue how to treat it. I've tried asking around within a 50-mile radius. Somehow none of them have a single clue on what to do, and I'm not about to adopt something I'm still afraid of because that won't magically cure my cynophobia. Lucky for me, I needed no stitches, but that day was terrifying. I'd say the breed of the dog, but I don't want people from either side leaping down my throat. I awoke during an ungodly hour, not long before my alarm was set to go off, to shouts resonating throughout every corner of my home. Shouting was not an uncommon occurrence within my home, so I regarded the commotion as nothing more than a disturbance, an irritation. I assumed it was another bout of familial drama, or a very loud conversation. Dismissing it as such, I began to doze off once more, only to hear shouting again, louder and with much more fervor. It definitely had to be drama ensuing, right? And, for the sake of maintaining the fragile semblance of peace, as well as my own sanity, I often mediated. I assumed that that time would be no different than any other. And how I wished I was right. Groggily staggering my way towards the commotion, I noticed my mother standing in my sibling's room. Before I could even begin to ask what the problem of the day was, she had collapsed, shouting at us to call an ambulance. We were younger then, so we had a bit of a hard time picking her up off of the floor, not to mention we were in a state of dumb confusion, trying to fully process just what was happening at the time. Was she in pain? Was it another blood clot? Another stroke or heart attack? Was there a chance she pranking us? For context, my mother has always been severely ill since childhood. In recent years, she's developed several chronic illnesses, all chipping away at her immune system to the point that she's virtually terminal. This wasn't the first scare that's occurred, but it had never been as severe as it was that particular day. Taking her to the sofa to make her more comfortable, I noticed that she could barely move. She could barely keep her eyes open. She could hardly talk. Her chest wasn't even rising and falling anymore. All the while, my siblings and I could do nothing more than pace and stare, wordlessly questioning whether there was anything more we could do than just stand by and hear her groan in agony. Of course, like always, there was nothing that could be done other than waiting for the dust to settle. Finally, just as her head began to loll to the side, the paramedics arrived and managed to get her stabilized enough to carry her to a stretcher. My siblings and I watching from the window as the ambulance drove away. It wasn't until my nerves had eased enough that I could sit longer than 5 seconds that I realized if they'd arrived any later, we would have watched our mother die right in front of us. Needless to say, I wasn't tired anymore. When I was 10 years old, to be fair, I'm only 18 now, so I have a long way to go. My parents brought my brother and I over to Malaysia via the causeway connecting Singapore and Malaysia to visit my grandparents who were in their vacation house. A little fuzzy, since I haven't been there, the causeway, in a while, but essentially since we didn't have a car, it was just stand in this line, have dad hold the tablet up, and give you his right earpiece and watch anime together. The lines get pretty long in the afternoon. Get your passport checked. Don't remember why, but my parents decided to split one child to one. So I guess I'm lucky I got my dad with me. Fast forward a bit, and we are walking down this sorta wide open hallway to somewhere. Dad's in front a little, I'm just trailing and trying not to get lost in the multitude of people around us. Suddenly something grabs my neck real tight and stops me. I look to the right and connected to the massive hand is this huge burly ass man with the, admittedly, most impressive, biggest beard I've seen ever, and he's wearing one of those terrorist looking outfits. Yak now, those stereotypical Israeli terrorist outfits you see in documentaries? Don't mean to be racist or offensive to anyone here. So there's me, 10 years old, relatively tall for my age, but skinny and nothing but a book and my jacket in hand, and this giant man had his hand firmly on my neck. In the middle of a huge crowd in what might as well be a foreign country. So obviously in my head I go, oh shit, it's her and I'm gonna die also, man. At this point I was literally ready to scream and bite his hairy knuckles off of me. Again, doesn't help that dad's 3 meters ahead and not known to be the most observant man ever. To my surprise he smiles and starts speaking Malay or some Eastern language. Actually might have been English through a thick accent, but I couldn't comprehend at the moment. To me, as a Chinese boy with little to no exposure to Malaysia and its culture, even in Singapore, ready to sheet my pants, I obviously had no idea what he was saying, but had enough grasp on my wits to smile and give him a look of confusion. After, like, 10 seconds dad turns around, and for some reason they start talking and smiling, like they're business partners meeting up to discuss their next financial transaction. Not only was I extremely scared, but frankly kind of confused at this point, so I just stayed quiet with his hand still on my neck. At the end, after the man had gone, dad has the audacity to ask Scary, and grin. To this date I have no idea who the man might have been, or what his intentions might have been, but it's stuck with me ever since as being intensely scary. Was into the whole backyard wrestling thing in the 90s. We were not bright. We used the high school soccer / practice field because we actually had a few dozen fans who would come and watch. Some would tape it. All in all, it was one of the few things to do on a Sunday in our small town. Towards the end of our 3-year run, a few guys were going away to college. The 2 guys who started the group were going to have one last match and then retire. One of those guys was insane. He'd already been blinded in one eye due to wrestling and would go on to die in the ring as a professional wrestler years later, and felt like it was his job to leave everyone breathless. Well, long story short, he came up with this idea to be powerbombed off the top of the scoreboard tower, which was conservatively 10 to 12 feet off the ground, probably more like 15. The time comes, and we set up to table to break his fall. Yet as the moment came, everyone saw that the tables were too far from the base. Unfortunately, this was as crazy friend was on other friend's shoulders. We all shouted to stop, and somehow they heard us and tried to stop, but crazy friend already had his weight over the edge and ended up tumbling backwards off the tower. He hit one of the crossbeams on the base and shattered his upper leg bone. One of the worst parts was having to hold him in place while the EMTs put his leg in and immobilized. His leg was bent in too many directions. He, fortunately, went on to recover, and with a steel rod in his leg he recovered full mobility. But watching him fall from that tower is burned into my mind. Several of us, more than 20 years later, still have nightmares about it. I have been followed so many times, it's not even funny. I have a tendency to be excessively paranoid and panic easily due to years and years of abuse, rap, etc. This year alone I have been followed 6 times. Most recent was this Monday. I was on my way to work with my best friend in the passenger seat. So lucky this time I wasn't alone. Driving at 4:30 am. It's dark obviously. A truck passes me. I completely forgot I had my brights on, and honestly my brights are not much brighter than my dims. I've accidentally left them on a few times over the years, and not once has anyone done a "hey, a shat, your brights are on" flash. Anyway, he passed me, only to suddenly go from 60 to 45. I assumed there was a deer and just hit my brakes. Another car starts coming from opposite way, realized my brights were on, so I shut him off. Without thinking, once he went past us, I flipped him back on. At this point there is a good 4 to 5 cars length of space between us and this guy. I realize that this is still relatively close, and I had a moment of oh my god, I'm such a dick. I probably just blinded him. So, just as I was about to turn my brights back off, this dude slams on the brakes, flips his blinker on, pulls over, so I went around. He then proceeds to hit the gas, turn on his brights, that were like bright, and ride our ass. Like so close that if I even tapped the brakes he would have hit us hard. I moved my mirrors, so I wasn't blind, and just kept driving. Like if he wants to be childish and stupid, fuck him. From the point he started tailgating us to work is 20 miles. And at this time of day there is never really anyone on the road. We see maybe 1 or 2 cars until we get to the freeway. I mean, could have been coincidental that he had to go the exact same way as us the whole time, but he followed us all the way to the freeway. Our last second blinkered and he followed. He was so determined he even almost caused an accident by fully cutting off a semi going 70-80 miles per hour at least as he got onto the freeway, just so he wouldn't lose us, and still left his brights on. If I changed lanes, he changed lanes. At this point I'm like, okay, yeah, this is weird. Had my friend pick up my phone and message our maintenance guy at work. He's a badass motherfucker. He used to be the supervisor and honestly we both trust him with our lives. He messages him and tells him, hey, some person in a pickup is following us to work and we don't know what to do. He just tells us, pull into the front gate, I'll be outside waiting. Suddenly the last exit before our turn off he whips off the freeway. I was panicking so badly. Go talk to the current supervisor, tell him what happened. And he laughed and goes, EHH, you would have been fine. Even if they did follow you here. Worry too much. They wouldn't have done nothing. Like basically brushed it off entirely. Like I was joking or being dramatic, and he would have done absolutely nothing if they had followed us and been dangerous. Luckily the maintenance guy's ex-military, he doesn't fuck around, and was ready for anything. Scares me what could have happened if they did pull in after us and all we had was our idiotic supervisor to help us, a guy who worries if we don't wear our PPE, but if a potential dangerous situation that would put 2 of his employees at risk is presented, he laughs. Obviously would have called 911, but in my panic first thing I thought to do was get a hold of the maintenance guy. I'm just glad the guy finally turned off. TLDR, accidentally pissed someone off. They followed me almost all the way to work. could have been dangerous. Supervisor thought it was funny. Maintenance guy was ready to mess someone up. My friends and I always go to this remote / backcountry lake multiple times every summer. It's really like a secret paradise, and every time we camp there we jokingly consider staying and starting a hippie commune. Despite being so majestic, it is quite remote. No cell phone or internet service available because it's surrounded by large mountains and is even distant from any well-traveled roads, only logging roads, and even still it's down a ravine and hard to find. Because of this, there is always a fear that our camp could attract a grizzly bear, as they do live in the area. If someone were to get injured, it would be a long while to get to the closest hospital. We are sitting around the campfire telling stories and having some drinks, and the evening is coming to a close. While we had another incredible day, that fear begins to mount. Looking around at the total darkness, what if something is out there? We were all thinking it, but no one was addressing it. All of a sudden we hear that stereotypical mountain lion / big cat noise. You know, the one just outside of the ring of light. We all looked at each other with wide eyes without speaking, while saying to each other, "Did you just hear what I just heard?" We all heard it. We needed up making noise and shining our flashlights, and eventually went to sleep in our tents. None of us slept well that night, and one even stayed by the fire wide awake. Point in hindsight, the next day, I thought, if a cat was really hunting you, it wouldn't make that noise. It would just attack. It must have been something else. Regardless, in the moment we were all quite spooked, and it makes for a great story point. Despite always take precautions without food and being very mindful of being so remote, we always get scared before bed. Luckily we haven't come across anything dangerous or had any mishaps, at least not yet anyways. I was 14 and me and my girlfriends used the sleepover trick to go out and celebrate carnival in a different town. It was a fun evening till we arrived in a billiard bar. I left the group to order a drink at the counter and got babbled on by a drunken guy. I injured him and tried to stay friendly, but wanted back to my friends. He tried to stop me and got more and more aggressive. Suddenly an older guy tipped on his shoulder and asked him to listen to me and leave. It escalated quickly. Long story short, my drink landed on the babbler and the older guy won. As an excuse he bought me a new drink and I invited my new one savior to my friends. Our recently extended group had fun and went to different bars. Everything was fine. I mistakenly thought. As the evening progressed, Mr. Savwa somehow got awkward. I can't say what it exactly was, but remember small things like his looks that gave me the creeps. I met my friends at the toilet and found out that they felt the same way. So we did the only logical thing and escaped off a tiny toilet window. Still laugh as I remember one of my friends got stuck and we had to pull her, panicking like a monster was behind her and we could let her back out. Save, we thought. On our way home it was quiet as fuck, so we could nearly hear every sound coming from the alleys around us. Steps. Fast. Then slowly. Then quiet. We thought we are going crazy and forgot about them. At least we tried. The steps continued. Closer. We saw him and ran. As we thought we lost him, we suddenly realized that the alley we took just split, and since he wasn't behind us anymore, he'd come from the left side as soon as we'd reached the next junctions. Never again felt such a terrible fear. My girlfriend cried and all of us thought we are going to die. I picked up an empty glass bottle and smashed it, ready to defend. Then we ran. No one dared to look back till we reached my friend's house. Point obviously we didn't die. We don't know when he gave up following us. Maybe he heard shattering the glass. I just know I never felt so much fear. And sometimes the first impression is wrong. As a kid, my friends and I were wandering around a country club that was closed for the season. We played on the swings, wandered the grounds, and then started to leave. We'd gotten there by traveling through my backyard through massive acreage that used to be a cow pasture. I mean, it was like a 10-minute bike ride, a trek through some woods, crossing a small river, quite a journey. So we only knew the one way back, and the rest of the place was fenced in with like a tall chain link fence topped with barbed wire. As we went to leave though, we saw a guy dressed all in black and holding a machete. When we called to him, he raised it threateningly. He was blocking the only outlet and we didn't know what to do. We waited for him to leave, but he didn't. So we searched the grounds for a way around or out, but were fenced in. We found a payphone and made the decision to call 911. We had no idea where we were, but somehow they were able to find us. They drove around a bit before finally seeing us, and a neighbor lent them a ladder to help us get over the barbed wire point. It was such a faked up situation. I think the cops found the guy as we were getting our bikes. It was this neighborhood bully that was much older than us and who used to terrorize everyone on our bus. Don't know what happened to him though. Not exactly scary, but just creepy and uncomfortable. I'm a transgender male, born female, identifies as male. I was hanging out with a friend at a BBQ her family and friends did every night for dinner. I was staying the night anyway, so I had to go. Her parents knew I had come out as transgender recently, and they and their friends were curious about my plans to transition, which is fine, because they were supportive. It was nice talking with them, but that nice feeling didn't last long thanks to the host of the BBQ deciding to take questions a step further. We'll call him Bruh, because I don't remember his name. I want you guys to know I was 18 when this happened, and Bruh was like in his 40s. Keep this in mind. So, I was talking to the group about me wanting to start testosterone once my parents have adjusted to my new name and pronouns. Then, Bruh had a question. Bruh, so what kind of surgery are you going with? Me, oh, I want to go all the way. Bruh, ah, okay. So, what kind of dick do you want? Me, I'm sorry. Bruh, what kind of dick do you want? Are ya getting one of them tiny dicks, or are ya gonna get a big fat one? Me, well, I haven't looked into those types of surgeries yet, so I don't know. Bruh, you should get one of them big ones. Don't go tiny dick cause you can barely call yourself a man at that point. Me, okay. Bruh, and when you get one, I wanna see. Come back over and wipe that bad boy out. I'm curious what that would look like. I was getting really uncomfortable and the others could tell, so they told him to shut the hell up and we just changed topics. I didn't feel okay with talking to him the rest of the night. My friend apologized for how creepy he was being when we got back to her place. I said it was fine when really it wasn't, and I just didn't want to talk about it after that. I don't plan on going to another BBQ if he was there again. Was at a lake with some friends 2 years ago, and there was a spot to go cliff diving. So many people swam there and it always seemed safe. Only 2 deaths on record in the span of like 50 years. I had just jumped and veered off on accident towards a deeper part of the lake. Most people jumped straight. I went towards the left a bit. I remember being underwater and my ankle got tangled in some vines all the way at the bottom. I tried to stay calm. Yanking wasn't helping. So I opened my eyes underwater to try to quickly untangle my foot. No dice. I tried kicking myself upwards from the bottom, but the vines were strong. I couldn't see well, and I tried kicking my foot again to get it free, and when I kicked I knocked into an unbalanced rock pile, and a big one fell onto the ankle that was already stuck. I was screwed and started panicking. I remember thinking back, that's it, I'm gonna die today. My friends will all be traumatized for having me jump first. I didn't even hug my mom goodbye this morning. Fact, the stars must have aligned for me that day, because unbeknownst to me, there were a group of people doing dive training that morning. My friends saw them, and when I had taken too long to come up, 2 of the divers swam to me and got me free, right as I had run out of breath. Scariest experience ever. I still keep in touch with one of the divers from time to time, and this actually got me to quit smoking, because I realized I really couldn't hold my breath for long. I would say that time I got robbed by the lankiest, most crazy looking, probably filled with diseases, sunken-eyed drug addict out there last year. I was 17 and it was the first it ever happened. I was about 15 minutes away from where my friends were at. I had 20 euros with me for a night out, and that motherfucker took it from me faking he had a knife/gun under his jacket, when he was very clearly using his hand/finger. So much shit crossed my mind. I first thought I should just give him the bill and move the fuck on, and then I thought about how small/malnourished he looked and was considering lashing out and beat the shit out of him out of pure angriness. I had been put in this situation for some faking reason. Then I thought about my girlfriend slash family and how they'd feel if this plan went to shit, and maybe he did have a faking gun, knife or something, anything really. So I swallowed my pride and buried those I can be my own hero versus this faking wreck of a human and just gave him the faking €20 bill, told him to fuck off, and ran like a cheetah. I still think about that faking guy from time to time and get mixed feelings. Sometimes I hope he got clean and is doing something good for himself slash community, and others I just hope he's on a faking ditch dead somewhere busy not being a problem for anybody else. I don't know, fuck that experience, that's for sure. A friend had called to tell me she was on her way over, so I unlocked the front door and went about my business. A few minutes later my friend comes busting in our front door with a strange woman holding an infant and told me to lock all the doors and call the cops. Turns out this woman's boyfriend takes her on a drive, and once in the car, he starts beating her and tells her he's taking her down to the lake to kill her and the baby. At this point she takes the baby out of the car seat hoping the boyfriend will stop beating her while driving. Doesn't work. As they slow down to make the sharp curve behind our house, she jumps out of the car with the baby and hides behind our barn. A few minutes later she starts walking down the road crying, just as my friend pulls up and rushes her inside. Luckily my husband was working from home that day and is able to call the cops while grabbing his baseball bat and our German shepherd and stand by the door. We get my own children, my friend, the woman and her baby, and hide in my son's bedroom. Sure enough, the guy comes driving around looking for her and realizes our house is the only place she can be. Country road with few houses, comes banging on the front door and windows, screaming for his girlfriend to come out so he can finish the job. Husband tells him to F off and cops are on their way and he eventually leaves. Baby has some kind of medical condition and is on a oxygen machine, so as he speeds away, he throws the machine out the window and into our driveway. Cops come and so does social services, sheriff's office, pediatrician and respiratory therapist. The rest of the morning, there's people in and out of our house as we are also questioned and give statements. We get summoned to court that next winter to testify against the guy, but the girlfriend is a no-show, and so the case is dropped. Prosecutor tells us this kind of thing happens all the time and it's most likely she's already back with her abusive boyfriend. Not sure what happened to the baby. They wouldn't give me any information, which is understandable. He was the same age as my youngest, 5 months, so I often think about him and whatever became of his life. I hope he was taken into the foster care system and eventually adopted by a wonderful and loving family. I've had a few scary situations in my life. But there was this one time a big group of us, like 12 of us, went way up to northern Minnesota, Minnesota. It's the boundary waters, as we've always called it, cause it's so close to the Canadian border. So, anyway, we had to have 2 camping sites due to rules up there. My group was on an island. One of my friends and I decided to walk around the island to check it out. There was somewhat of a trail that we were following. Well, the trail ended, and so did the path. Like, literally as big as Boulder. But, if you look down, it was kinda slanted, and it looked like the trail picked up down the hill. Maybe about a 10 to 15 foot drop, but it was at a slant, so we could just do that slide, with one leg out, and the other tucked in. We saw a tree trunk. It was kinda smaller, but we figured it would work. And it did, for my 5 feet 7 inches 135 pounds friend, kinda. He told me it was smaller than we thought and it kinda moved when he hit it. So, I, 6 feet 1 inch 205 pounds, went and hit that stump, and kept on going. Luckily there was some roots there. I was literally hanging off the side of the island, looking down at all the rocks at the bottom and the water. It was about a 20 to 25 foot drop point. It literally felt like minutes. I know it was just seconds, but it was like slow-mo. I don't know how else to explain it. 7 at night. December 2019 or January 2020. I was outside at the end of my driveway taking a breather. I saw 3 hooded figures walking past the corner. There was a man in a black hoodie, a girl in a red hoodie, and a kid in a white hoodie. Once I seen them, I felt really strange. I had a gut feeling something was gonna happen, so I ducked behind the car. A few seconds later, they stopped and looked. After a few seconds, they kept walking towards the way they were originally headed. I thought it was over, but it wasn't. A few minutes later, they came back, heading towards the way they were originally coming from. I jukes behind the car again, but it was too late. They started sneaking towards me. It's important to note that there is another house next to mine, then a ditch, before you have to pass, before you can get to the corner from my house. My neighbor's car was parked on the side of the road, facing the ditch. These people started sneaking up on me, so I ran up through the side of the house to the back door. A minute later, I went and looked out the window in the front door. There they were, looking everywhere in front of my house. A minute or so after, I went to look again. They were standing in front of my house, hood still on. Needless to say, I screamed, and my dad went outside with a bat. They, hopefully, never came back after that. Also, this is a true story. Sorry if a few things don't make sense, as I have had a traumatic brain injury. I tried to describe things as best as I could. Even though I wasn't scared in the slightest, this would probably be the scariest. Me and my brothers were out ping, we hadn't started yet and were just chilling in a church parking lot chatting. Some dude came out to his house across the road. I didn't notice. Watcher. Doin. Everyone. But me noticed, since I was talking. Watcher. Doin. Him. Still oblivious. Talking some shit. Or. Just don't answer. Me. Pauses as I hear a voice unfamiliar to me. I knew all the voices in our group. I look around, noticing everyone is not moving, speaking quietly, straight-faced. I look confused at my brother, but he probably didn't see, because I was wearing a Jason mask, as we were gonna TP some people who knew us, and didn't wanna be recognized. My brother said quietly, "He's talking to us." I look around, alright. Imagojit my gun. Walks into house my brother, sheet, go, Geo. I hop in the truck, and as we were heading out I saw him walking in the hall that leads to the door holding something in his hands. I assumed it was a gun, because that's what he threatened us with. Looking back, we probably shoulda just stayed there and called the cops on this bus baby. Why don't just threaten some teens chilling a church parking lot, chattin'? I got a plan to go back there and see if the same thing happens and get this person in trouble. Go out there, chill in the church lot again, and have our phones ready to record, and got one of us to call the cops. What I think? In the Navy I almost died twice. First time was back when I was active duty. We were doing a replenishment at sea, and I was on what they call the PD line, short for phone and distance line point. The way it works is we shoot a line across to the refueling ship that's tied to our PD line. They tie it off on their end, and there is a line of us on our holding the line as taut as possible, as it has a phone line interwoven with it, so our phone talkers can talk to them in case radios go down. It also has flags that hang from it to tell how far the ships are apart. Too close together they will collide due to the Venturi effect. Too far apart, we can't refuel, and could possibly damage the refueling hose, so it's a constant battle of letting out slack and pulling in slack, and you need multiple people to hold onto it. The person at the front of the line yells out slack or to heave if they want to let out slack or to pull in the slack point. Well, I was up front and it's windy, and there was this seaman behind me who I've had issues with in the past. Nothing bad, but he was an idiot. So we are dealing with the refueling operation. Next thing I know, I get yanked forward and it tosses me against the lifelines, and I stop myself by grabbing onto them, essentially stopping myself from getting tossed over. So I'm looking over the edge of the ship at the waves not even 10 feet down, and I realized if I went over I'd get sucked down and either get minced by the propellers or drown. I turn around and the seaman who was supposed to be behind me helping me hold the line is just standing there looking at his hands. Apparently they started to hurt, so he let go of the line. I was furious and started yelling at him, asking him what the fuck was wrong with him and what not, before the safety officer stepped in and told me to step back and to cool off. Second time was actually just earlier this year. Got deployed to Iraq and got rocketed. Nothing super interesting about that one. We pissed in some owns Cheerios and they didn't like us, so they launched a bunch of rockets at us. At the time I wasn't really that scared, just on edge, but looking back, yeah, it was kinda scary. I had never been in that situation before. I was at Boy Scout camp, and one of the merit badges made us build a shelter for the night with only 10 feet of rope and things around us. My friend and I had just finished our shelter, and were sitting by our shelter, when we hear everyone gather at the campfire. Now, 2 of the boys went off to use the bathroom and they saw someone shady in the woods. We had a late kid coming in with one of the counselors. Everybody got quiet, and you could hear the sound of people's heartbeats over the light crack of the fire. And the counselor with us, that had the walkie-talkie, radioed him asking if he was near, and he went, "No, we are by the bridge, just leaving." And the whole earth went silent in realization that we are not alone, and in unison, you could hear the sound of 20 knives being drawn from their sheaths, ready to fight. I decided that we needed to create a workhorse of a group to be safe. I called out, "Everyone listen to me. I need a group of men to go and take apart the shelters for firewood. I need another group to find and make spears," I said. "I want 2-man lookouts to watch all night," and that's when we all started singing Almost Heaven, West Virginia. You take the gathered sticks and build up the fire. Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah River. I want a spear for every man. Life is older than the trees, younger than the mountains. What did he look like? Country roads, take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads. Flight or fight has kicked in. Of course, being me, it's fight. With all the adrenaline pumping, I yell, "Come at me, beach." The night has gone by and it's now 3 AM. Everyone is asleep, except me. These are my brothers, I thought. I must watch over them, I said, like the shepherd does his sheep. An hour until we can leave this hellhole. It's now 4, and we are marching down the mountain, like an army. We are sore and tired, and the blood is pumping back in, replacing the adrenaline. My knees start to give out, but my best friend is there to catch me. We are back at camp, paranoid of the mysteries of the dark woods. I hear this loud growl, and I scream, but it was just the guy in the camp next to ours with nasal issues. And my friends and I talk about this encounter ever since. To come to mind when I was in 8th grade, so around 12 to 13, I was walking my dog at night at a local park. It has a wood section, with lights at the path, and then open area, no lights but semi-lit from street lights a bit away at first part, then pitch black at second part. Walk through woods okay, and we turn into the open area, so woods are now behind us, and my dog kept looking behind us and growling. We had her 14 years and that was the only time I ever heard her growl. I couldn't see anything, but she definitely could tell something was behind us in the woods. TBH, probably just a coyote, but scared me enough I booked it out of there and back into neighborhoods. I was not about to walk into the dark section not knowing who or what was watching us from the woods. I also had a time where I got into my car after shopping, middle of day, and a guy knocked on window. I stupidly rolled window down assuming I must have dropped something. I live in very safe town overall. It's a guy who looks like he's probably just in 30s, but super sun damaged skin, so looks way older. I was 18 or 20, and he says, "I saw you walking across the parking lot and I just thought you were so beautiful and knew I had to come over and tell you." Verbatim, it's burned into my brain. At that point every warning bell started going off in my head that he's either going to drag me out of car or shove his way in. I knew I had to get myself out. As I'm frantically starting car, he followed it up with, "I bet you're married though, aren't you?" So I obviously reply with a yep, and slam my car into reverse. At that point I didn't care if I hit him or another car. I needed to get out ASAP and would call the cops later if I did. Fortunately for me, didn't hit him or anyone else, so I just drove out of there as fast as I could. I was so shaken up because it was middle of the day and other people were around, so I hadn't even thought twice about opening window, since who would try anything in that situation? All I could think of besides him about to be wrapped and or murdered was that street least I had just texted a friend while in checkout line that it'd text her something once home, so if I didn't text she would be able to send up somewhat fast. I don't think she would have immediately suspected anything, but faster than any family may have who may just assume I was out still.